Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us here at Oakridge Student Ministries for week 4 of our Into the Unknown series. I'm Jeff, and I'm the Youth and Young Adult Minister here at OPC. So, Into the Unknown, what's that all about? What are we looking at in this series? This series, we're looking at how to deal with all of the unknowns and changes in our lives. Some changes are really easy to deal with, while some others can be really hard. When we experience the unknowns that go along with the changes in our lives, we all have different ideas about how they make us feel. Maybe you think that some changes are good, like a starting spot on a team, or a new friend in your group, or at your school, or a growth spurt that makes you tall enough to ride the cool roller coaster, or be on the right team, or maybe the changes are not so good and they make you feel not so good, like your parents losing their job, or your sister getting sick, or suddenly failing a class at school. No matter what kind of change is something that we're all going to experience. So let's talk about how to handle it well. Now, let me ask you a question about all this change stuff. Have you ever tried to make a change in your life because you thought it would make your life better? Like eating more vegetables and less pizza, or studying for the test the night before, instead of cramming 30 minutes before your class, or putting your phone away and actually talking to your grandparents during dinner. Maybe you can relate. I'm sure there are some things in your life that you've thought about trying to change. For you, maybe it's school. Maybe you know your English grade could improve, but you also know that it will require more time studying and less time playing video games. And while bringing up your grade is important, you're not sure you have what it takes to put down the video game controller and pick up the book. Or maybe you need to get serious about practice. Whether it's soccer or band or drama, you know you're not giving it your all right now. You know you need to put in just a little bit more work to actually do what you need to do for yourself and for your team. Maybe you've even tried, but the amount of time and energy it took felt like more than you had to give right now. Maybe you need to make a change in your friendships. You know you've spent time with people who aren't the best for you. Being around them has changed the way you talk, the way you act, and the choices you make, and not in a good way. But you've been friends with them for a long time, and you know how much effort it will take to make new friends. It just feels like an impossible change to make at this point. Maybe it goes a little deeper for you. Maybe you've developed some habits that you know aren't helpful to you. Maybe it's the things you look at online that you think nobody knows about, or the hurtful comments you post anonymously on social media, or the things that you're doing in a dating relationship that you don't feel comfortable with. See what I mean? I think we can all come up with something that we know we need to change. But while the things we need to change may look different for each of us, I think that there's one thing we all have in common. We all know that actually making a change can be really hard to do. Why is that? If we know that we need to make a change and that that change will make our lives better, why don't we do it? Well, maybe we're afraid to fail. Maybe you want to step out and make that change. But what if it doesn't work? What if you study more and still don't pass? Or practice more and still don't get the starting spot? Or you try and make new friends and get rejected? That feels a lot like failure. And it isn't something most of us want to experience. Or maybe you don't want to seem different. You don't want to stand out in the crowd. If people see you trying to make a change in your life, they'll notice something is different about you. That you're not spending time with them the same, or you're not posting on social media as much, or the things you're posting are different, or you're not that into video games as you used to be. That feels like a lot of attention, doesn't it? Maybe you want to make a change, but not if it means that everyone is going to notice it about you. Maybe you're worried about what other people will think. If you start changing things like your words, or your interests, or your choices, or your friends, those things will make people look twice at you and think that maybe you're being fake or judgmental or acting like you're better than them. That doesn't feel like something you want to deal with, does it? Or maybe, honestly, that kind of change just feels completely overwhelming. It's one thing to say you're going to change, but to actually do it, well, that's going to take some serious effort, and a lot of it. Between school, homework, practice, and your chores at home, doing anything else just seems exhausting to even think about. And listen, I get it. Sometimes the idea of making a change in my life leaves me feeling overwhelmed and stuck. But I think that all the effort, all the work, and all the stuff that comes with making good change in our lives can be worth it. In fact, I think God can actually do a lot for us when it comes to change. We just have to be willing to take that first step. To help you see what I mean, I want to read a little bit of a letter written by a guy named James. And it's interesting because James was actually the half-brother of Jesus. I mean, can you imagine if the guy who shared your bathroom, sat at the dinner table with you, maybe flung peas at you, and left socks all over the house, was not just your brother, but the actual Son of God? That was the real life for James. And eventually, he grew to be a believer and a follower of Jesus. Before we get into what James wrote in his letter, let me give you a little bit of background on what was going on at the time. During one of Jesus' last talks with his followers on earth, he told them that they would be his witnesses in their hometown and beyond. What does that mean? Well, basically, they would be the people who would spread the message about Jesus to people where they lived and in places all over the world. And in order to do that, Jesus' followers had to make a change. They had to be willing to leave where they were and go out into the world and tell people about Jesus. Now, of course, his followers were on board with the message of Jesus, but the idea of leaving their homes and their families and their comfortable surroundings to share the message with other people in other places, well, that was a change that they seemed scared to make. So at first, most of them stayed right where they were. But then, something kind of awful happened. The early Christians who followed Jesus back then started to be harmed or threatened because of their belief. Some of them were even killed. And because this was happening, people ran from their cities and their homes in order to stay safe. So with all of that going on, James wrote a letter to encourage his fellow Christians during this very change. Here's what he wrote in James chapter 1, verse 2. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Okay, let's get real for a second. None of us actually want to do this, right? None of us want to consider our troubles a reason to have joy. The changes that we're going through, the difficult stuff we need to do better in our lives with, we're supposed to have joy about that. I don't know about you, but my immediate response is no thank you. Well, before we throw out this letter completely, let's read one more thing that continues in chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. For you know that your faith is tested. Your endurance has a chance to grow. So let your endurance grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. See, the reason we can find joy in the hard stuff is because those changes and troubles are for a reason. In fact, they can lead to something really great in our lives. And that thing is endurance. Maybe you've heard this word before. The word endurance is usually associated with athletics. When we train and work hard over time, our bodies will get better at what we're doing. The more we run, the longer we'll eventually be able to run. That's because we've built up endurance. The more we do it, the stronger we'll become. The endurance that James wrote about works the same way. When we take a step towards making a change, we're working on building that endurance in our lives. When we decide to study more and pass that class, we do it once, then we do it again and again and again. Is this always easy? No. But the more we do it, the easier it will get. The more we show up and keep trying and keep working through the change, the stronger we'll become. And the stronger we become, the more endurance we'll gain to help working towards that change in our lives. And that endurance can help you be confident when everything changes. Essentially, James was saying, practice makes perfect. In other words, working towards change by pushing through the pain and the hard stuff doesn't just make you better at the thing you're working on, it actually makes you better at change. You're developing the kind of endurance that will help you when you face any unknowns. And that's important because change and going into the unknown is something that we're just going to face for the rest of our lives. Building endurance now by making change now can help you be better at change as you face it and grow up. You see, God can use the unknown to make you stronger. God can give us the strength to step out and make positive changes in our lives. God can help us build our endurance. He can help us be confident when everything changes. And that will help us stand strong when we face changes that we choose and changes that we don't. Of course, I realize that this idea doesn't get everybody excited about deciding to make change in their lives. Honestly, I think it probably felt that way for the people reading James's letter back then. I mean, these people were making a change to avoid being killed. That's a pretty risky thing to do, and an uncomfortable thing. But James was trying to remind them of the same thing I want us to remember today. I want us to remember that when it's hard and uncomfortable and painful to go through, then God can use that change to do something in us. God can use the change to change us from the inside out. And I don't know about you, but just the idea of that is enough to make me want to give it a try, to start building the kind of endurance that can help me handle change, to start believing that God can use the unknown to make me and you stronger. So I want to encourage you to try a couple of things this week. First, I want you to name one area of your life that you want to see change in. I don't know what it is for you, but I want you to name a thing, a change that you would like to make. Then, take just one step towards making that change. And then, when it doesn't work out perfectly, try it again. Keep trying. Name that one area, and every day this week, take one step towards making that change. When you fall short, try again. Build a little endurance to make that change. When it gets easier, thank God for helping you build that endurance. And when it's hard, ask God for a little help to keep going. Because we need to remember that the work is building something big in us. To believe that God can use the unknown to make us stronger. I know that making a change and going into the unknown can feel really scary. And it can be easy to think that you're the only one trying to figure it out. But the truth is that you're not alone when it comes to navigating this whole change thing. That's actually why we have our group here on Sundays, so that we can share what we're going through and encourage each other along the way. I want you to think about sharing what you want to change with the people in our group. And then let's encourage each other to keep going when it feels difficult. Let's cheer each other on as we build the endurance to make a change in our own lives. Now, as we wrap up, I want you to think about your answer to this question. What's one change you want to make in your life today? Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.